Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the weekly MMA Cycles Market Update. This is your host, Gianni DePoce, and it's great, as always, to be back with you all. We had another eventful week in markets. We had the Federal Reserve raise interest rates by 75 basis points after we had inflation reports the previous week come in above expectations. So this was actually a bit higher than what the market initially expected, at least coming into this past week. But by Monday, a few days before the Fed meeting, markets did, it turns out, come to expect a 75 basis point rate hike by the Fed. So that's the highest singular rate increase by the Federal Reserve in a few decades. And it's a sign, in my view, that they're starting to panic with respect to inflation. So we saw some big moves in equity markets. So we can go ahead and look at some charts for that. We'll start off by looking at the Dow Jones. Initially, we had a positive reaction to the Fed's 75 basis point rate hike, but then the next day stocks gapped down lower on Thursday, erasing all of those gains. On Friday, we're seeing a little bit of a bounce here coming off of those lows after making a new multi-month low here on Friday. So needless to say, bears are still in control of this market, but we did see that reversal in the middle of the week after we had that Tines Saturn square Neptune on the 16th. It was one day before, or one day after, rather, the Fed rate hike. And then this weekend, we are going to have Venus square Saturn on June 18th. That's going to be a big aspect. But then next week, our sights are set on the trine between Venus and Pluto on June 21st, the same day as the start of the summer solstice. And for those of you that like to follow the works and the studies of W.D. Gann, he always made a very strong point to watch the markets for key turning points when we ingress into the cardinal signs. So whenever the seasons change, spring, summer, fall, and winter, so Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, according to his work, that is, tends to lead to important turning points in markets. So let's go ahead and look at the NASDAQ here as well. NASDAQ led the market lower throughout the week, but here it's leading the market higher on Friday, getting a nice bounce, but just made a new multi-month low, a sign that the bear trend is still very much in effect. I want to go ahead and look at interest rates today because we had a new multi-year high registered earlier in the week, and we're getting a little bit of buy the rumor, sell the news in the short term with respect to what's been going on. So interest rates are coming down a little bit in the U.S. After making a new multi-year high. And again, this came after the Fed raised interest rates 75 basis points. But I think it's important to highlight what's been going on around the world in the interest rate market. So we see how the 10-year yield for the Treasury in the United States made a new high and was coming back down. But I want to look at Japan. The 10-year yield on the Japanese Treasury spiked. It exploded higher this past week, and Japan has engaged in what's known as yield curve control of the Bank of Japan, and we could start to see that backfire. We saw the dollar lose some ground against the Japanese yen a little bit, and I think it's basically investors rushing in to gobble up these higher yields in the short term. But we saw something similar happen in the Eurozone as well. In Germany, we're seeing, the 10-year yield spike as well. So this led to a little bit of profit taking in the U.S. dollar. We can go ahead and look at a chart of the U.S. dollar basket here, coming down a little bit, but here on Friday, staging a nice recovery rally, and the euro and the yen are both down pretty hard against the U.S. dollar. So definitely something to keep an eye on, because the interest rate differential between the U.S. dollar compared to the Eurozone or the Japanese yen is pretty significant. So that's going to remain a significant tailwind for the dollar going forward. And we note that, Uranus is still transiting through the sign of Taurus, and that leads to, boom bust cycles. And not very many analysts are talking about a potential boom in the U.S. dollar during this transit of Uranus in Taurus. But again, there's usually a bust. So there's a good chance we see a major decline in the dollar by the time Uranus exits the sign of Taurus in a couple of years from now. But I do want to look at crude oil as well, because crude oil is coming down pretty hard here on Friday. The pullback really started to accelerate in the days leading into the Sun square Neptune aspect. So we know that Jupiter and Neptune are the co-rulers of crude oil, and our sights are set on the Neptune retrograde motion that's set to begin on June 28th. And this is one of the most powerful geocosmic signatures according to our work. So definitely have to keep an eye on not just crude oil, but any and all markets around that time, and especially as it pertains to weather events as well. So we're in a very interesting period this month in June, because we had Saturn go retrograde earlier this month on June 4th. And now we're having Neptune go retrograde in about 11 days from today. So, you know, there is some distortions that are happening in terms of reality and what, you know, we should believe or what we shouldn't believe. And I think these two planets, you know, Saturn ruling reality, Neptune ruling the dream world, have a lot of impact on this right now. You know, there's a lot of panic setting in, recession fears. You know, with Saturn going retrograde, it seems like the recession fears accelerated. Now with Neptune going retrograde, could the inflationary fears, you know, start to accelerate even more, despite crude oil coming back from a high in the last that it formed in the last week or so. But in any event, you definitely want to see how we are positioning. So I would encourage you to check out our MMA cycles report that was sent out last week. And then I would also encourage you to check out our free weekly column that Ray writes each week as well. And he's also going to be doing a special update for the Chinese markets in gold and crude oil in the next couple weeks. So definitely check that out at www.mmacycles.com. The last two charts I'm going to look at, I want to take a look at the home building index, because we looked at this is the ETF XHB. Because we looked at interest rates, we saw interest rates went up pretty significantly. That's a major, it's major hindrance for demand in the housing market. And we see this starting to unwind in the home builders ETF, which peaked at the end of last year, and starting to see reports of new home builds marking down their prices to try and get their inventory off the books. So definitely something to keep an eye on, since housing is such a big entry on the consumer balance sheet when it comes to net worth in the United States. And the last chart I want to look at is Bitcoin. We collapsed lower in the last week or so. For those of you that follow our MMA crypto reports, the bearish outlook in crypto is something we've been really pounding the table on. So definitely would encourage you to check out our work on that front. So that's pretty much everything that I wanted to cover today. So hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching. We are going to have a very special guest joining us next week, so you're not going to want to miss that episode. And I will not share who it is, but I will give you a teaser. This analyst slash trader slash astrologer is very well known for his work in Bitcoin. So that's all I'm going to say for now. I'm not going to spoil it. We'll leave it as a surprise. So definitely would encourage you to check it out next week. So thank you for tuning in, www.mmacycles.com, and thank you for watching.